This is Kickin' and Streamin' Podcast, a binge watcher's guide to streaming movies, TV series, and stuff. Here are your hosts, Graham and Jocelyn.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Kickin' and Streamin' Podcast. My name is Graham and today I'm flying solo. Jocelyn is ill today, so we are going to be trying to do this episode. It's going to be a short one, of course, but we are solo. So bear with me because, again, today I don't have a co-pilot, but I do have a very cool show to discuss with you, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity. I hope you find it interesting. Today, I'll be talking about a Prime Video show called Small Axe. Small Axe is an anthology of about 5 movies directed by British director Steve McQueen, and 3 of those movies have already been released on Prime Video. Originally, it was conceived to be a series, but when Steve started doing the project, that was back in 2010, he realized that he had enough material to make a particular movie about each topic. So again, we're talking about a series, sort of a mini-series, if you will, but each one consisting of one movie. And so, as of now, we are talking about 5 movies, but if you go looking for it on Amazon Prime, on Prime Video, what you are going to find is the first 3 movies. The first one, of course, is Mangrove, and the second one is Lover's Rock, and the third is called Red, White, and Blue. And I'd like to talk about these because I've had the opportunity to binge watch all 3 of them, and I am entirely fascinated. Let's first start with the title of this anthology, Small Axe. If you are a fan of Bob Marley, you are going to be familiar with Small Axe because it is the title of one of Bob Marley's songs. That is, if you know anything about Bob Marley past Could You Be Loved and No Woman No Cry, those aren't only the 2 songs that Bob Marley has. So what I mean by that is Small Axe comes from a Jamaican proverb which says, if you are a big tree, we are the small axe. And I think you can see where this is going, because as a matter of fact, the lyrics of Bob Marley's song continues by saying, sharpened to cut you down, ready to cut you down. And so Small Axe, this anthology of movies by Steve McQueen, directed by Steve McQueen, tell the stories of the West Indian immigrants in London during the 1960s and 1970s. And I think the title in and of itself is very apropos because the West Indian community, immigrant community in England might be one of the biggest at the moment. We're in 2020. But of course, it is easy to suppose that in 1960s through the 1970s, there were just a small burgeoning community. And of course, they were subjected to a lot of police harassment, in some cases of police brutality, systemic racism, as it happens all the time in most of industrialized countries. And so this is the moment we see through these movies where this community starts to unite and rise as a people to demand rights and certain civil liberties, and also burgeoning as a community that becomes part of the everyday life of British society. And so these are very important movies, and the casts are absolutely fabulous. And I can't wait for the next couple of movies to be released on Prime, because I know that the upcoming ones are going to be Alex Whittle and Education. So let's talk about the first movie you should see on this anthology. Mangrove is about the story of the Mangrove Nine. And what happens here is a man played by Sean Parks opens up a restaurant in Notting Hill in London. And it's, of course, a Caribbean restaurant. This is a man from Trinidad. Man's name is Frank Critchlow. He opens this restaurant, and it becomes basically a community center for the West Indies community in that area. So everybody who's everybody goes there, which is what happens in any community. Food unites people. Food brings people together. And when you are an immigrant, the closest thing that takes you home is food that tastes like from home. That is as simple as that. And even if you've never migrated to another country, when you've moved from one state to another, there are certain things from your state that you miss. And when you find those things, it takes you home. I remember a bit more than 10 years ago when we moved from New York to North Carolina. My wife is originally from New York, born and raised. And the one thing that we went around Charlotte looking for is any pizza that was somehow similar to the texture, to the feeling of New York. We found some that came close, but it wasn't an easy find. And you might ask yourself, well, pizza is pizza. Why does it have to taste like New York? Why does it have to feel like New York? That is the immigrant experience. It is, you are looking for something that not only takes you home, but reminds you of home. And so a restaurant in that respect, in any community that serves the kind of food that you are accustomed to, you will be drawn to it. And that is what happened here with the Mangrove in Notting Hill. But of course, the police, specifically a police officer by the name Pulley, decided to make it his life mission to harass this restaurant, to harass Frank Critchlow. And the story devolves there. It becomes, the whole thing becomes a movement. There's not a riot, but a peaceful demonstration that people became provoked and confronted the police. And obviously the justice system in London wanted to make an example out of that, and basically created this whole circus of a trial. Two of these individuals that were accused of riot and affray were barristers. They were lawyers in themselves, and they decided to represent themselves. And Frank Critchlow got represented by another lawyer. And the fact of the matter is, it goes in from there, and you have to see this development because it is a beautiful thing. I will be talking about the cast on this one because I find that, it is... The one thing I can tell you is that on this first movie, you might not be able to identify anybody you know but Letitia Wright. And Letitia Wright, if you remember, is the actress who played T'Challa's little sister on Black Panther. She is perhaps the most recognizable face in there, and she is absolutely marvelous. And she is playing a real life character by the name of Althea Jones LeCointe. She's actually Dr. Althea Jones LeCointe, and she is a writer and activist, and sort of like started the Black Panther movement in the United Kingdom, specifically in England. And again, Letitia Wright is absolutely fantastic in there. You have to see for yourself, because after you see the movie, after you watch the movie, go and Google Miss Althea Jones LeCointe, and you will see the similarities, and you will then imagine why it is that Letitia Wright was the perfect cast for this movie. Malachi Kirby plays Darkus Howe, who is the other individual who was a lawyer, and he basically crushed it. He crushed it as Darkus Howe and also as a lawyer. So you have to see these. Sean Parks plays Frank Critchlow, and yeah, there's nothing else to say because the movie was about Frank Critchlow, and Sean Parks delivers. It is important to see all of the dynamics here, because the one thing you can learn from this movie is that you don't necessarily become an activist because you always thought that you were going to do something like that. These are things that fall on your lap. These are things that happen because the situation demands it. And sometimes, even when the situation demands it, you don't necessarily fall into place and understand, I've got to do this. So sometimes, even when you find yourself on the other side of the societal abuse, you don't know that you are being called upon to rise up. And you will see these dynamics here. You will see that people don't just start being part of a struggle because they want to be on the front line. It is not an easy thing to do, to decide to put your life up there and say, yeah, I'm going to be the voice of these people. But it happens because there is a need, there's a greater need for justice. And when you care about justice, you make sure that your voice is heard. The second movie you are going to see on this anthology is called Lovers Rock. And again, I before I started watching the movie, I thought about all kind of things, like where is this story going? Because one of my favorite albums by Sade is called Lovers Rock, and it is a beautiful thing. So I knew it was about music and beautiful, liming, nice grooving music. And I, at some point, before I started watching it, I thought it would be, about people in a band and, touring and things like that. But to my surprise, that wasn't the case. And I am absolutely marveled by this movie because it is all about, from the beginning to end almost, about a house party. About a house party that is going down and everybody feeling the music, everybody having a good time, some love stories burgeoning right in there. But if you thought that It is impossible to watch an entire movie about a house party, not the organization, not what comes before, not what comes in the middle, not any drama that may occur, but rather what's going down during that party. The music playing, the DJs and the entertainers doing the thing, and people just dancing, dancing like there's no tomorrow, singing. There is a moment in this movie that I find absolutely exhilarating, absolutely beautiful. It is the it was an ambitious thing to do, because you can see people's lips moving when they're dancing and they're singing along with the song. But there is a moment there where it almost takes you inside, in the head of the people dancing. And so the music sort of stops, and all you hear is their voices, a cappella, singing, but completely out of this world. It's almost that rejection of self and just plunged into the music, and in your soul just making it happen. And it goes on for longer than you, if you were a director, would have let it go. Because you would have thought, if you were editing this movie, you would have thought, yeah, maybe 30 seconds of this is enough. Because you would think people's attention span is not going to be enough to continue. But it goes on for a little longer than that. And when the music resumes, you actually feel like, man, this was too good. It should have continued. And so Lovers Rock is one of those movies where not a lot of traumatic things happen. There is not a specific plot, but there is an idea. And that idea is so incredibly abstract that you're fine with what's going on. Nobody needs to explain anything. You're fine watching what you're watching. I don't know how else to say this. One notable figure, notable face in this movie, Lovers Rock, is going to be Michael Ward. If you remember Top Boy from Netflix, it's a series, I think that was from last year. Well, the series is actually older than that. There was a first Top Boy that was in the early 2010s, sorry. And then the series was sort of like picked up by Drake, the Canadian rapper, and then they created a new version of Top Boy. Michael Ward starred in the newest version of Top Boy. And so if you're familiar with Top Boy, you will remember that. There were a lot of actors from Black Mirror on this one too, on the entire anthology. So you will recognize some actors if you are familiar with Black Mirror also. But yeah, this second movie it's a mood. That's the only way I can describe it. That second movie is a mood, and I don't know. It's one of the most beautiful things I've seen in a movie where a lot doesn't happen. So let's go over the cast for you. It's not a huge cast, of course. So you have Michael Ward as Franklin Cooper. You have Amara J. Santoba as Martha Trenton, and Kendall Williams Sterling as Clifton. There's a few other people there, but these are the main characters that you will see. in this movie that will call your attention. And then finally, we're going to move on to Red, White, and Blue. And Red, White, and Blue is sort of like a return to the struggle because it is basically a young man who, after his father, his Jamaican father, has been brutalized by the police in London. This guy, who is a research scientist with a PhD, decides that change can only happen from within. And so he decides to join the police force. This character is played by John Boyega, so he's like a major star, of course, from Star Wars. And he plays Leroy Logan, right? And so this is this is a guy who is the son of an immigrant, a Caribbean immigrant who is absolutely proud. And there's a moment there where he actually says to the dad, "You wanted us to be more British than the British. So do your work, put in your work, work hard, study hard, and be better at everything than everybody else." And so this guy, his dream wasn't for his son to grow up to be a police officer. That is simple as that. So now it's on. So imagine your son deciding, hey, I'm going to join the enemy. While the father has a civil case going on with the police and wanting his day in court. So this is what Red, White, and Blue is about. But the fact of the matter is, the London Police Department at the time wasn't racially diverse, and I'm not entirely sure that it is as racially diverse as it should be, even in actuality. But he goes in there and he thought that, yeah, I'm going to make some changes. And I'm sure that he makes the changes. Those changes, but they didn't happen, rather quickly. I feel like Leroy Logan was sort of like the Jackie Robinson of the police force. The difference is, while Jackie Robinson was given a very hard time within baseball with the people that he played, his colleagues, well, he was a hero outside to his people, right? The problem with Leroy Logan is that the hate was coming from both sides. He was called a traitor by civilians within his community. People didn't want to talk to him. He wanted to sort of like start all of this community outreach and stuff, and nobody wanted part of that. But yet inside also, he was subjected to a lot of hatred and abuse by his fellow officers. And it's a story that I guess McQueen decided not to conclude, because it just ends right at this moment of absolute despair and doubt. Did I make the right decision by doing this? Am I doing something here? Is this ever going to work out? And that's where it ends. I encourage you to watch these movies. And as I said, I can't wait for the next couple of movies to come out. I am grateful to Steve McQueen for this anthology, because these are stories that need to be told. And there is a community out there in England that has been thriving for a long time. But still today, they are the small acts. They are the small acts. And so Prime Video is where you will find this. And tell us what you think if you are watching on YouTube. Thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe and also comment and tell us what you think. This has been Graham coming to you live. Thank you very much. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to Kickin' and Streamin' Podcast. If you found value in our content, please subscribe and share. We would also be delighted to hear what you think of this podcast. So please rate us by writing a quick review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on all major social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. Join the conversation happening today on our Facebook group.